The Department of Water and Sanitation has continued to defend its decision to procure the services of 24 Cuban engineers to assist with the country's water challenges. The move, which will cost over 46 million rand, has been met by widespread criticism from various quarters questioning the need for Cuban engineers over the country's own skills in the sector. The Water and Sanitation Department's acting Deputy Director General for Water Resources Infrastructure, Leonardo Manus, joins us now to clear up some of the issues around this Cuban delegation. Mr. Manus, thanks for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you very much for having me.
Can we start by clearing up the confusion around the overall spend, the cost of the project to bring the Cuban engineers to South Africa?
Well, in the first place, we need to understand that in any company, you have a salary and then you also have a total functional budget to allow people to do their work. And in this space, it was the same. The Cuban engineers and specialists as being brought in according to the bilateral agreement that we have with Cuba is being remunerated at the level of salary level 9, according to the PSA, which is less than 700,000 per annum. Which is quite basic as far as the engineering salary scale is concerned. So everything else is in terms of accommodation, traveling, equipment, computers, and the assets anyway will remain the property of the department subsequent to their placement and when their duration is actually completed here. So in terms of the salary scales that we have in the country, they are actually some of the cheapest that we have on our books, and to note that there are 24 out of 383 engineering staff that we have in the department, which makes them actually a fraction as far as the local capability that we have actually employed into the department.
So what exactly then, Mr. Manus, is the rationale behind the procurement of the services of these 24 engineers?
Well, as I said, that we have a bilateral agreement with Cuba, as we have with many other countries, where we also then attain some of their skills as well as the equipment. Recently, we had the launch of the Japanese equipment that we're actually going to use at Roodeplaat in Pretoria as well, and that was part of that bilateral agreement. But in terms of the rationale, in terms of why we actually use them, is from a perspective that the embargo and sanctions that have been placed on Cuba have actually forced them to have a different approach to engineering, where our own engineering, we have brilliant skills in the country, and we don't want them to come and compete against our brilliant skills, but rather to complement from a perspective where their skills have been developed into keeping infrastructure in an operable state, noting the fact that they have very little resources as far as finances are concerned. When something breaks down, they can't just go to the nearest store to go and buy it due to the sanctions. So they have an attitude of maintaining, of rehabilitating and prolonging the life of infrastructure that we feel that our young engineers can also benefit from. And so once again, just to emphasize that point, Sakina, is that it's not a point of bringing engineers into the country to compete and to take the positions of our locals, but rather to complement with that skill in terms of prolonging the life of assets as we have it.
I think you would have noticed by now, though, Mr. Manus, the outcry, the pushback against this particular move. And I think the thing that South Africans are particularly affronted to or about in this regard is that they say we don't have a skills shortage in this regard. We have unemployed graduates. We have unemployed engineers all over the show. And why would South Africa then go and bring skills to the country that we already have, especially given the high unemployment rate that we are saddled with in this country? How do you explain that to South Africans?
Yeah, as I can actually say, I can understand completely the outcry, but I also think it needs to be seen from another perspective, that the department remains quite committed, very much so committed to actually doing that in terms of developing our own skills locally, as we have done last year. And we continue doing. We have a learning academy in the department. We've employed last year alone 125 new graduates into that program, of which 51 were permanently employed into the department. So we remain committed to that. We have set out some tenders as well, or bids, as well as where we also allow the private sector to come and assist us, because we do believe that the problem is big enough. There's enough challenges for everyone to play a role in that space, and we trust that as we will also now go out with the rollout in terms of the infrastructure program that we have, that we require some of the private sector to come and assist, that they too will play their part in taking up some of the graduates that might not be placed in that space, as the department is committing as well. So we do believe that the 24, that is actually a small fraction as far as the bigger picture is concerned, is not competing in that space, but is bringing skills. Now, we do understand that when a graduate is graduated, he or she's got a qualification in engineering, and we appreciate that. But then the development is required to bring into that space to get a new skill set, or additional skill set for that matter, to make them professional engineers, and to bring in that space where they are experts, or get experience rather, in the various spaces. So this is one of the attributes to that building and expanding the experience of the engineer to make them complete in all areas. Now, the Cubans can't bring the design aspect. They can't bring all the other programmatic aspects that we currently have developed to the great extent to ourselves, where we're quite proud of our tertiary institutions in terms of what they attained and what they achieved in that space. But this is an element of the expertise that the engineer requires in terms of the maintenance part, that we believe that is actually making a more circumspect development of our graduates as we have them in the department.
But Mr. Manus, did the department do an empirical audit as to ascertain that South Africa, in fact, does not have those skill sets that you say these 24 engineers are bringing?
Surely we'll find that skill set perhaps amongst the more experienced engineers, and yes, definitely it's there. But unfortunately, that also comes at a price, and I think as part of the bilateral agreement, it allows us to ensure also that we have a placement, a more I don't want to use the word long-term because for a longer duration at a certain space. If I'm going to ask any of our locals, as we've done before, where we've advertised positions perhaps in places called Jericho and into Galaval, and we had to advertise 4 or 5 times to get people there. We still didn't stop. We recently could place 4 engineers in those most remote areas. But as I said, that this is part of a program to ensure in terms of which will benefit both countries as far as their experience is also concerned, but it's part of that bilateral agreement to ensure that we can also just utilize their skills in that space.
But surely charity begins at home, and this is the problem that you have at the moment. Nobody has anything against the Cubans, the Cuban engineers per se. The problem is that COVID has exacerbated our unemployment problem. Prior to that, we already had an issue with employing our own. And there are so many engineers who wrote to me last week directly about having to go outside of South Africa because there were no opportunities. And they specifically felt hard done by. They felt affronted by this move on the part of the government. So, charity beginning at home, how do you explain that? It's not about the nominal amount that you will be paying, but I think it's about coming clean to the South African public and saying, you know what, this is about, if it is the case, about servicing our bilateral relations, our diplomatic relations with Cuba more specifically. Is that the case?
Well, it's more circumspect than that, because that would try to actually force a singular view in a more circumspect situation, which bring in a more bouquet of solutions that is actually bringing together. Yes, I don't want us to lose picture of the fact that there is still positions that's being filled in the department. The Cubans didn't come and take positions in the department. This is additional to the structure. This is a program of development, a program of bilateral agreement. Internally in the department, we have 383 engineering folk that we have actually being employed. We're still doing that. We're still advertising positions. We still have a learning academy that will allow graduates that have actually attained their degrees in in engineering, in science, to actually apply to become part of the program, and through that get a further development whilst receiving a salary for that matter. And that is what we are doing. We're continuing doing that. And I think that I would just encourage those who actually feel that they have nowhere to go to start also to apply through these processes so that we can also accommodate them as far as our internal commitment and our local commitment to development in the engineering fraternity is concerned.
But should that not have been your first port of call, Mr. Manus? Should you not have sought those skills internally, made sure that it is only on the basis whereby you absolutely could not fill said positions with engineers from South Africa that you would go outside?
Yes, as I said, again, it is part of a program. As I told you, that it's a bouquet program. As far as the bilateral agreement is concerned, it's part of the fact is that we know that internally we have some skills as far as maintenance is concerned. However, this is a different approach that we have. And just like in the medical fraternity, where a similar arrangement is in place, this is what has been done in this, but to a much lower scale. We do believe that there's some skills from other areas in other parts of the world that is also being sourced to actually augment our current skills in the country. Might not be necessarily at this point in time in the water sector, but as far as the country is concerned, I don't think we are an island in terms of the global picture of engineering, just as much as we contribute to the international conference on large dams, ICO. The department is playing a central role in that space, in sharing skills in other countries as well in that space. I think that it should be welcomed in terms of the fact is that we are trying to actually have a more globalistic view in terms of our engineering development in the water space.
So we have to wrap this up, but just finally, what exactly are those specific skill sets that these 24 Cuban engineers bring, the exact specifics? And also, we saw in the weekend paper some reports that seem to suggest that there could be a licensing and accreditation issue for some of these engineers working here. Can you confirm that?
Yeah, I think I'll answer your latter part of your question first, because that's a newer question in terms of the EXA registration. The department doesn't refute or refuse to accept the situation as far as EXA's regulation and registration requirements is concerned. That is true. We're working with them. We are, at this point in time, also having our own graduates subjected to a program towards professional registration, and that is true. The Cuban engineers at this point in time, unfortunately, due to part of the sanctions and embargo that's on that country, they cannot be part of the Washington Accord, hence preventing them from being registered immediately upon arrival in the country. But as per their own experience and as per their own exposure, they are eligible as per the EXA requirement. As we engage with them, they are eligible for registration, but that is a process that will need to be taken. As far as the experience is concerned, your first part of your question, I think I need to reemphasize that. It's just on a space, Sakina, that if you note the fact in terms of the Cuban situation that they have, is that their focus is not on development and design of new elaborate engineering structures or infrastructure. Their experience is more in the space of rehabilitating and prolonging the life in terms of the infrastructure that they take responsibility for. So in that space of asset management, we felt that it's an element of experience that they can bring to contribute to the South African experience that we give to our graduates in terms towards a broader spectrum of engineering expertise.
Well, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much. That was the Acting Director General for National Water Resource Infrastructure at the Water and Sanitation Department, Leonardo Manus.